Thursday, September 2nd, 2021.
Thanks. Thank you. Well, Justice Sonia Sotomayor said the new Texas law creates what she calls citizen bounty hunters. Here's the way the new Texas abortion law works. If you're a girl who grows up in Texas and then in college meets the person who you think is the love of your life, and you have a loving relationship in every way that's important to you, and 6 months or a year into that intimacy, you share the worst thing that's ever happened to you, and you tell your partner that a few years ago your father raped you, and you became pregnant, and you went to Planned Parenthood, and they helped you end the pregnancy, and your partner is very supporting and loving and through tears says everything right in that moment, but for reasons having nothing to do with that moment, just the normal twists and turns of young romance or romance at any age, you eventually feel yourself drifting apart from that person, and at some point you break up, and your partner does not take it well. Your partner becomes enraged. And so this person you thought you loved, this person who thought you thought loved you, becomes a citizen bounty hunter and files a lawsuit in a Texas court to sue everyone involved who provided abortion services to you. The people who helped you when you needed help the most, the people who helped you in the darkest moments of your life. 4 years. Every day for 4 years after that abortion is performed, everyone involved in performing that abortion can be sued at any time in those 4 years. If the citizen bounty hunter who betrays you wins the lawsuit because 4 years later, the records aren't clear on whether a test was done to establish any cardiac activity in the embryo, then everyone involved in that abortion, except the pregnant woman, is going to have to pay damages of at least $10,000 with no limit on those damages, all paid to a person who betrayed your confidence, who took your most painful experience to court for money. And the people involved in performing that abortion are going to have to pay the attorney's fees of the citizen bounty hunter who betrayed that intimacy to go into a Texas courtroom and sue the people who ended the pregnancy that was caused by rape and incest. The Texas law does not make an exception for cases of rape or incest or both, because that is a matter of Republican religion. It wasn't always that way. The first abortion language to appear in a Republican platform was in 1976, and the platform called for, quote, continuance of the public dialogue on abortion and supports the effort of those who seek enactment of a constitutional amendment to restore protection of the right to life for unborn children. Now, Republicans knew there would never be a constitutional amendment. They were just trying to appeal to the anti-abortion vote. That's all. The last debate among Republicans about what their anti-abortion position should be, what it should be on exceptions for rape and incest, was 21 years ago, when John McCain and George W. Bush were running against each other for the Republican presidential nomination. And by that time, the Republican platform opposed all abortions without exceptions for rape and incest.
George, do you believe in the exemption in abortion, case for abortion for rape, incest, and life of the mother? Then, you know, it's interesting. You were talking about printed material that's mailed out. Here's one that says that George W. Bush supports the pro-life plank. Pro-life plank, yes. So, in other words, your position is that you believe there's an exemption for rape, incest, and life of the mother, but you want the platform that you're supposed to be leading to have no exemption.
Yeah, but the platform, I will.
Thank you.
The platform talks about, it doesn't talk about what specifically should be in the constitutional amendment.
It doesn't have the exemptions
Please let me
in it,
finish,
and
John.
you know that very
John,
well.
Let me finish. The platform speaks about a constitutional amendment. It doesn't refer to how that constitutional amendment ought to be defined. It does not, John.
You read the platform, it has no exceptions.
John, I think we need to keep the platform the way it is. This is a pro-life party.
Then you were contradictory.
May I finish, please?
Contradictory
May I
the
finish,
platform.
please? please. We need to be a pro-life party. We need to say life is precious. And that's what our platform refers to. And that's why we need to leave it the same.
During that campaign, John McCain was asked by a reporter on his campaign bus if he would tell his then 15-year-old daughter that she could not have an abortion if she became pregnant. And John McCain said, "No, I would discuss this issue with Cindy and Megan, and this would be a private decision that we would share within our family. Obviously, I would encourage her to know that that baby would be brought up in a warm, loving family. The final decision would be made by Megan with our advice and counsel. And I think that's such a private matter." And all reasonable people agreed with that answer, but immediately a panic set in among the McCain campaign staff over that answer, and John McCain took it back. The New York Times report of that day says, quote, "A short time later, Mr. McCain telephoned reporters and said, 'I misspoke. What I believed I was saying and intended to say is that this is a family decision. The family decision will be made by the family, not by Megan alone.'" 8 years later, John McCain was the Republican presidential nominee of the party that believes in no exceptions for rape or incest or both. And he chose as his vice presidential nominee the governor of Alaska, who fully embraced the Republican doctrine of no exceptions. 4 years later, the Republican nominee was Mitt Romney, who embraced the Republican doctrine of no exceptions. When Mitt Romney was running for office in Massachusetts, he ran as a full supporter of Roe versus Wade. Mitt Romney went from completely pro-choice as a candidate in Massachusetts to completely anti-abortion with no exceptions when he became the Republican presidential nominee. Mitt Romney changed his position to comply with the demands of Republican politics. John McCain changed his position to comply with the demands of Republican politics. George H.W. Bush changed his position from a supporter of Planned Parenthood as a Texas congressman to the standard Republican anti-abortion position to become Ronald Reagan's running mate in 1980. Those are not deeply held beliefs. Those are political beliefs adopted in service of ambition. And as the Republican Party became ever more insistent about the absolutism of their no exceptions position on abortion, young Republicans in law schools dreaming of becoming Supreme Court justices knew what they had to think in order to become Supreme Court justices chosen by Republican presidents. And so you have the majority of the Supreme Court tonight who have said to the women of Texas, if you are a rape victim, if you are an incest victim, and if you end a pregnancy that results from those crimes, everyone involved in ending that pregnancy can be sued. And that is why you won't be able to end those pregnancies in Texas, because abortion providers cannot run the risk of losing their homes to provide services to women in need. People working in abortion services have been taking their lives in their hands for decades in this country. People who claim all life is precious have shot and killed abortion providers in this country. And now this. Now they want to bankrupt them. Supreme Court justices appointed by George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush and Donald Trump have delivered what every Republican presidential nominee since Ronald Reagan has promised their voters they would deliver. It may be that all of the Republican presidential candidates who ran as anti-abortion candidates with no exceptions did not believe what they were saying. But the Supreme Court justices chosen by Republican presidents are now enforcing the words that those presidents at least pretended to believe. Leading off our discussion tonight are Carol Sanger, Columbia University law professor and author of the book About Abortion, Terminating Pregnancy in the 21st Century. Also with us, Maria Tracy Kumar, president and CEO of Voto Latino. She's an MSNBC contributor. And Professor Sanger, let me begin with you. This evolution of Republican thinking on abortion obviously is something that law students with judicial ambitions were paying attention to, knowing where they would have to go on this if they were ever to make it onto the federal bench and above. And it seems to me that the message, whether the politicians believe what they're saying or not, has been accepted by the judiciary they appointed.
Well, I don't I try to keep Republican and Democratic politics out of the class, but there certainly are interest groups now, the Constitutional Law Society and the Federalist Society, that support pro-life and pro-choice positions. I'm not sure if that's what you're asking.
Maria Tracy Kumar, I want to get your reaction to the situation in Texas tonight with providers basically shutting down.
This is incredibly dangerous because what you're doing is that you're putting so many women's lives at risk. And the women that you're putting at risk are not the wealthy women. They will always find access to abortion care. They might be able to go into a different state to do so, but you're putting at risk the women that are most vulnerable. And let's be clear, Lawrence, that women that are seeking abortion in the second trimester are oftentimes women that have found that there is something wrong with the fetus, or they find out within 6 weeks that they are pregnant, and they're realizing that the best decision for themselves and for their family and for their existing children is to make the hard personal decision of ending a pregnancy. What the Republicans have done today is telling women that not only do they not have agency over their body, but they're also telling them that they do not know how to best value their priorities to make sure that their existing children and family are safe. This is incredibly devastating, and we cannot take it lightly because the fight not only continues, but it demonstrates what the stakes are when it comes to the election, even in the midterm, because everything that we are talking about when it comes to women's ownership of their body, what we can do when it comes to the ability to communicate our health and our priorities has been basically tried to be stripped away. The fact that Justice Roberts today said that this decision was unprecedented, and he sided with Sotomayor, he sided with Kagan, demonstrates that this is not only highly unusual, but they have politicized the Supreme Court in the era of a woman's right to choose.
And Professor Sanger, in Justice Breyer's dissent, he referred to running the financial and other risks that come from waiting for a private person to sue them under the Texas law. And the Texas law, as I said, gives them 4 years. And so for 48 months after every abortion that might be performed, if any are performed under this law, everyone involved would be waiting the 48 months to find out if they're going to get sued.
Yes, and what I think we see from that is the kind of that has a huge societal, cultural implications. It turns a community into something like a surveillance state, and it's not clear yet what kind of evidence you have to show or bring in. But we know that if you're going to get your $10,000, you've got to prove that this was an illegal abortion. So you have to have records, you have to have calendars, you have to have dates, you have to have testimony. All this is being assembled. And it's a very, uncommunity-like, and gives this financial incentive to hunt down your neighbor, your cousin, your friends, for financial reasons or perhaps for true devout beliefs. But in any case, it's not the kind of culture that we pride ourselves on having. So yes, Breyer has that right. It's a long time to be under suspicion, and women who have abortions even outside of Texas find that abortions come back to haunt them in future aspects of their lives, like an early abortion can come up in a family law custody fight. And there are a number of examples of that. An early abortion can come up in a job interview, even though that's not supposed to happen. So abortion is an excellent tool to hold over women's heads at various points long after the event, and that's one of the powerful things about having such an abortion-ridden culture, is that it stays with everyone in a very negative way.
And Maria Teresa, my point about the citizen bounty hunter, as Justice Sonia Sotomayor called them, is that they might not have to hunt. It could be an intimate, it could be your sibling, it could be someone you make the mistake of trusting at some point in those 4 years. And you share this secret with that person, and at some point down the road, for whatever reason, that person gets angry with you and decides, okay, I know how to get back at you. I'm gonna go to court, and I'm gonna be the person who sues over the abortion you told me about in a moment of intimate sharing.
Oh, Lawrence, what you are describing and what Sotomayor was describing is weaponizing a woman's most vulnerable moment. And that should send chills up and down everybody's spine. The possibility that all of a sudden, in the most intimate, most vulnerable moment, you share something with someone that was heart-wrenching for you to make that decision, and then they turn around and weaponize it, is not only immoral in so many ways, but it also makes women vulnerable. Folks know that oftentimes when an abortion happens, women also look for other services to make sure that it is a difficult decision, that they can have a conversation on mental illness and mental wellness. And this will prevent many of those conversations from happening. And we need to make sure that we're providing women with the full support. And the idea that your neighbor or your lover has the ability to hold something over your head that was a very private decision not only creates a cruelty, but it creates a gender imbalance where women, once again, are not on the same level playing field as men and are put instead in a place where they cannot fully exercise their agency and their ability to choose.
Maria Teresa Kumar and Professor Carol Singer, thank you both very much for starting off our discussion tonight.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Thank you. And coming up, Harvard's constitutional law professor Lawrence Tribe will join us next on the Supreme Court's decision about the Texas abortion law. That's next.